Okay, for the love of money. I guess it's a part three or something like this. Okay. I always looked enviously at the people who earned more than I did. Now, for the first time, I was embarrassed for them and for me. I made more in a single year than my mom made her whole life. I knew that wasn't fair, that wasn't right. Yes, I was sharp, good with numbers. I had marketable talents, but in the end, I didn't really do anything. I was a derivatives trader, and it occurred to me the world would hardly change at all if credit derivatives ceased to exist. Not so nurse practitioners. That's what his mom was. What had seemed normal now seemed deeply distorted. I had recently finished Taylor Branch's three-volume series on the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Movement, and the image of the Freedom Riders stepping out of their bus into an infuriated mob had seared itself into my mind. I told myself that if I had been alive in the 60s, I would have been on that bus. But I was lying to myself. There were plenty of injustices out there: rampant poverty, swelling prison populations, a sexual assault epidemic, and obesity crisis. Not only was I not helping to fix any problems in the world, but I was profiting from them. During the market crash in 2008, I'd made a ton of money by shorting the derivatives of risky companies. As the world crumbled, I profited. I'd seen the crash coming, but instead of trying to help the people it would hurt the most, people who didn't have $1 million in the bank, I'd made money of it. I don't like who you have become, my girlfriend had said years earlier. She was right then, and she was still right. Only now I didn't like who I had become either. Wealth addiction was described by the late sociologist and playwright Philip Slater in 1980 book, but addiction researchers have paid the concept little attention. Like alcoholics driving drunk, wealth addiction imperils everyone. Wealth addicts are, more than anybody, specifically responsible for the ever-widening rift that is tearing apart our once great country. Wealth addicts are responsible for the vast and toxic disparity between the rich and the poor, and the annihilation of the middle class. Only a wealthy addict would feel justified in receiving 14 million in compensation, including 8.5 million bonus, as the McDonald's CEO Don Thompson did in 2012, while his company then published a brochure for its workforce on how to survive on their low wages. Only a wealth addict would earn hundreds of millions as a hedge fund manager and then lobby to maintain a tax loophole that gave him a lower tax rate than his secretary. Despite my realizations, it was incredibly difficult to leave. I was terrified of running out of money and foregoing future bonuses. More than anything, I was afraid that 5 or 10 years down the road, I'd feel like an idiot for walking away from my one chance to be really important. What made it harder was that people thought I was crazy for thinking about leaving. In 2010, in a final paroxysm of my withering addiction, I demanded 8 million instead of 3.6 million. My bosses said they'd raid my bonus if I agreed to stay several more years. Instead, I walked away. The first year was really hard. I went through what I can only describe as withdrawal. Waking up at night, panicked about running out of money, scoring the headlines to see which of my old co-workers had gotten promoted. Over time it got easier. I started to realize that I had enough money, and if needed to make more, I could. But my wealth addiction still hasn't gone completely away. Sometimes I still buy lottery tickets. In the 3 years since I left, I have married, spoken in jails and juvenile detention centers about getting sober, taught a writing class to girls in the foster system. I started a non-profit called Grocery Ships to help poor families struggling with obesity and food addiction. I am much happier. I feel as if I'm making a real contribution, and as time passes, the distortion lessens. I see Wall Street mantra, we are smarter and work harder than everyone else, so we deserve all this money, for what it is, the rationalization of addicts. From a distance I can see what I couldn't see then, that Wall Street is a toxic culture that encourages the grandiosity of people who are desperately trying to feel powerful. I was lucky. My experience with drugs and alcohol allowed me to recognize my pursuit of wealth as an addiction. The years of work I did with my counselor helped me heal the parts of myself that felt damaged and inadequate, so that I had enough of a core sense of self to walk away. Dozens of different types of 12-step support groups, including Clutterers Anonymous and Online Gamers Anonymous, exist to help addicts of various types, yet there is no Wealth Addict Anonymous. Why not? Because our culture supports and even lauds the addiction. Look at the magazine covers in any newsstand, plastered with the faces of celebrities and CEOs. The super rich are our cultural gods. I hope we all confront our part in enabling wealth addicts to exert so much influence over our country. I generally think that if one is rich and believes they have enough, they're not a wealth addict. On Wall Street, in my experience, that sense of enough is rare. The money guy doing a job he complains about for yet another year so he can add 2 million to his 20 million bank account seems like an addict. I recently got an email from a hedge fund trader who said that though he was making millions every year, he felt trapped and empty, but couldn't summon the courage to leave. I believe there are others out there. Maybe we can form a group and confront our addiction together. And if you identify with what I have written, but are reticent to leave, then take a small step in the right direction. Let's create a fund where everyone agrees to put, say, 25% of their annual bonuses into it, and we'll use that to help off some of the people who actually need the money that we have been so rabidly chasing. Together, maybe we can make real contribution to the world. Well, the author, Polk, is a former hedge fund trader and the founder of the nonprofit Grocery Ships. What a wonderful article. That was the end, part 3, and let's wait for the beginning as well. Thank you for listening.